Welcome to Golden Bachelor. If you love celebrity news and real entertainment updates, you're in the right place. Fans of Bachelor Nation were left heartbroken this week as Joan Vassos quietly confirmed that her relationship with Chock has come to an end. What once appeared to be a hopeful new chapter has now turned into a moment of reflection, healing, and difficult honesty. Joan, who captured hearts with her warmth, strength, and openness, addressed the breakup in a calm but deeply emotional way. Rather than pointing fingers or creating drama, she chose transparency, explaining that sometimes love alone isn't enough to overcome the realities of life. According to Joan, the decision was not sudden. Behind the scenes, both she and Chock had been navigating emotional challenges that gradually became impossible to ignore. While their connection was real and meaningful, it became clear that they were moving through very different personal journeys. When Joan and Chock first connected, fans immediately noticed the chemistry. Their bond felt genuine, mature, and grounded in mutual respect. Viewers admired how they communicated openly and supported each other, especially given the unique pressures that come with public relationships. For Joan, the relationship represented something deeper than romance. It symbolized a second chance, proof that love could still appear after loss, change, and personal growth. Chock, too, seemed fully invested, often speaking about how much Joan meant to him and how seriously he viewed their future. But as time passed, the reality of blending two lives with different responsibilities, emotional histories, and expectations became more complex than either anticipated. In her recent update, Joan shared that the breakup followed a deeply personal conversation. She described a moment of clarity where both she and Chock acknowledged feelings they had been struggling to express. Rather than ignoring those emotions, they chose to face them honestly. Joan explained that the conversation wasn't about anger or betrayal. It was about emotional readiness, timing, and the weight of unresolved experiences from the past. Both individuals realized that continuing the relationship without addressing those inner struggles would only lead to more pain later. That realization, while painful, became the turning point. One of the most striking aspects of Joan's message was the respect she showed for Chock. She spoke kindly, emphasizing that the breakup did not erase the good moments they shared. She made it clear that neither person was at fault. Instead, she framed the split as a mutual decision rooted in emotional honesty. Sometimes, she said, loving someone also means knowing when to let go, especially when staying together might prevent both people from fully healing. This approach resonated strongly with fans, many of whom praised Joan for her maturity and compassion. Almost immediately, messages of encouragement poured in. Supporters expressed sadness over the breakup, but also admiration for how Joan handled the situation. Many fans shared personal stories, saying they related to the difficult choice of walking away from a relationship that still held love but no longer felt sustainable. Others thanked Joan for showing that endings don't always need to be dramatic to be meaningful. Comments flooded social media, emphasizing how rare it is to see public figures speak about heartbreak with such honesty and grace. As of now, Chock has not made a detailed public statement. However, sources close to the situation suggest that the decision was mutual and handled privately before Joan spoke publicly. Those familiar with Chock describe him as deeply respectful of Joan and mindful of the emotional weight of the situation. His silence has been interpreted by many as a sign of respect rather than avoidance. While the breakup is undeniably painful, Joan also shared that she is focusing on self-care and personal growth. She emphasized the importance of listening to one's emotional needs, even when doing so leads to difficult decisions. Joan admitted that the past few weeks have been challenging, but she remains hopeful. She believes that every experience, especially the hard ones, offers lessons that shape who we become. Rather than rushing into anything new, she plans to take time to reflect, heal, and reconnect with the parts of herself that bring peace and balance. What makes this update so impactful is not just the breakup itself, but the message behind it. Joan's story highlights a truth many people struggle to accept. Sometimes relationships end not because love disappears, but because growth requires a different path. Her words served as a reminder that emotional honesty, though painful, can also be empowering. Joan Vassos' confirmation of her split with Chock marks the end of a chapter many fans had rooted for. Yet it also opens the door to deeper understanding about love, timing, and the courage it takes to choose emotional well-being over comfort. While the future remains uncertain, one thing is clear. Joan continues to inspire not through perfection, but through authenticity. And for many watching, that may be her most meaningful chapter yet. In the days following the split, those close to Joan noticed a change, not just sadness, but a quiet strength. While heartbreak often comes with chaos, Joan chose stillness. She stepped back from the noise, limiting social media and spending time with close friends and family who reminded her of who she is beyond the spotlight. Sources say Joan has been leaning into routines that bring her comfort, long walks, reflective journaling, and moments of gratitude, even in the middle of pain. Joan understands that healing isn't linear, and she's allowing herself to feel everything without rushing the process. Rather than pretending everything is fine, Joan has embraced honesty, with herself most of all. What makes this split resonate so deeply with fans is how real it feels. There were no sudden scandals, no shocking revelations, no public arguments. Instead, it was the kind of ending many people experience in real life. The slow realization that two good people can still be wrong for each other at a certain moment. Joan reportedly struggled with the idea of letting go because the connection with Chock was genuine. There was trust, there was care. But over time, emotional differences began to surface. Differences that couldn't be solved by compromise alone. At some point, Joan realized she was spending more energy holding things together than feeling at peace within the relationship. That awareness, though painful, became impossible.
The final conversation between Joan and Chock was described as emotional but calm. There were tears, long pauses, and moments of silence where both understood what the other was feeling, even without words. Joan later shared that this was one of the hardest conversations she's ever had, not because of anger, but because of love still present. Saying goodbye when feelings remain is a different kind of heartbreak. They spoke openly about their fears, their emotional limits, and what they truly needed moving forward. In that moment, it became clear that continuing the relationship would mean ignoring truths neither could live with long term. So they chose honesty over comfort. Many fans have connected deeply with Joan's experience because it mirrors their own. Social media has been filled with messages like, "This feels too real. I've been in this exact situation." Walking away even when you love someone is the hardest thing. Joan's openness has sparked conversations about emotional readiness, boundaries, and the courage it takes to admit when something isn't working, even if the outside world thinks it should. For many, her story has become less about a breakup and more about self-respect. Though Chock has remained mostly private, those familiar with the situation say he too is processing the end with reflection rather than resentment. The relationship mattered to him, and the decision was not taken lightly. Friends describe him as supportive of Joan's choice and respectful of her decision to speak openly. There is no bitterness, just the shared understanding that timing and emotional alignment matter as much as affection. Their story didn't end in conflict, it ended in clarity. Joan has made it clear this chapter is not about finding someone new. It's about reconnecting with herself. She wants to rediscover what brings her joy outside of a relationship and give herself credit for choosing emotional honesty, even when it hurt. She believes love will come again, but only when it aligns with peace, not pressure. For now, she's focused on growth, healing, and trusting that endings can also be beginnings. This breakup may have closed a door many hoped would stay open, but it also revealed something powerful. Strength doesn't always look like holding on. Sometimes it looks like knowing when to let go. Joan Vassos didn't just share a sad update, she shared a lesson about love, self-awareness, and the bravery it takes to choose the harder path. And for fans who have followed her journey, that honesty may be the most meaningful part of all. As the weeks passed, the sharp ache of the breakup began to soften into something quieter. Joan didn't suddenly feel better, but she began to feel steadier. There were still moments, songs on the radio, familiar routines when memories of Chock surfaced unexpectedly. But instead of pushing those feelings away, Joan allowed them to exist without judgment. She came to understand that grief doesn't only belong to loss through tragedy, it also follows the endings of hopes, plans, and imagined futures, and that grief deserves space. Joan started talking more openly with people she trusted, sharing how difficult it was to release a relationship that still held warmth. Those conversations reminded her that heartbreak doesn't mean failure. Sometimes it simply means two people reached the end of a shared chapter. Behind the scenes, Joan also reflected on the quiet pressure that came with being watched. Public relationships carry expectations about timelines, commitment, and permanence that don't always match real emotional needs. Joan admitted privately that part of her struggle came from feeling like she needed to make it work, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in their story. Letting go felt like disappointing others, even when staying would have meant disappointing herself. That realization became a turning point. She understood that living truthfully mattered more than meeting expectations. One of the hardest truths Joan faced was accepting that love, by itself, doesn't guarantee longevity. There was affection, there was care, but there were also emotional rhythms that didn't fully align. Joan often found herself wanting deeper emotional presence in moments when Chock processed things differently. Neither approach was wrong, but they weren't always compatible. Over time, those differences created distance neither knew how to bridge without losing parts of themselves. Recognizing that truth didn't lessen the sadness, but it did remove the confusion. Though Chock remained mostly out of the spotlight, he reportedly sent Joan a private message weeks after the breakup, one that didn't reopen wounds, but gently acknowledged what they shared. It wasn't about regret or second chances, it was about gratitude. Sources say the message thanked Joan for the time, the honesty, and the respect they showed each other even at the end. For Joan, reading it brought tears, not because she wanted to go back, but because it confirmed they had ended things with dignity. Sometimes, closure doesn't come from grand gestures, but from simple
Joan
truth.
hasn't faded. If anything, it's grown. Fans have continued to comment on how her story reflects real adult relationships, ones shaped by emotional growth, not fairy tales. Many have shared that her openness helped them make difficult decisions in their own lives. Some admitted they finally had the courage to walk away from relationships that felt heavy rather than peaceful. Joan never intended to become a symbol of emotional honesty, but that's exactly what she's become. Today, Joan is moving forward, not by erasing the past, but by carrying its lessons with her. She hasn't closed herself off to love, but she's no longer chasing it either. She's choosing calm, choosing clarity, choosing herself. And while the future remains unwritten, Joan believes something important. The right connection will never require her to silence her needs or ignore her emotional truth. This story didn't end with a dramatic confrontation or a shocking reveal. It ended with something quieter, but far more powerful. Two people chose honesty over illusion, peace over pressure, growth over fear. And sometimes that is the bravest ending of all. One evening, Joan was asked a simple question by someone close to her. "Do you miss him?" She didn't answer right away. After a long pause, she admitted that she didn't miss the relationship the way it had been at the end, but she missed the version of herself she was when hope felt effortless. That realization surprised her. It helped her see that part of the pain wasn't just about Chock, it was about letting go of who she thought she would become in that future. That awareness brought both sadness and relief. For a long time, Joan believed strength meant enduring, staying, trying harder. But the breakup forced her to redefine strength entirely. Now, strength looked like saying the hard thing out loud, walking away without anger, accepting uncertainty without rushing to fill the space. Joan began to understand that strength isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet acceptance, choosing emotional honesty over appearances. As difficult as the breakup was, Joan eventually recognized an unexpected gift within it: clarity. Without the relationship, she began noticing how much emotional energy she had been spending managing expectations, hers, his, and everyone else's. That energy was now hers again. Slowly, she started investing it into things that made her feel grounded and whole. She took small steps, nothing flashy, nothing performative, just choices that felt right. Joan no longer believes love should feel like constant effort. She now sees love as something that should expand your sense of peace, not shrink it. She reflected on how easy it is to confuse intensity with depth and persistence with compatibility. The relationship with Chock taught her that emotional alignment matters as much as affection, and that ignoring misalignment only delays the inevitable. This shift didn't make her cynical, it made her more intentional. One of the clearest outcomes of the breakup was a new boundary Joan set for herself. She will never again silence her needs to protect a connection. In the past, she admitted, she sometimes minimized her feelings to avoid discomfort or conflict. Now she understands that unspoken needs don't disappear, they just resurface later, heavier than before. This boundary isn't about control, it's about self-respect. Longtime followers have noticed a subtle difference in Joan lately. Not sadness, but calm. Not withdrawal, but intentionality. She smiles more gently now. She speaks more thoughtfully. There's less urgency in her voice. It's the kind of change that only comes from hard-earned growth. Fans have commented that she seems more like herself, not the version shaped by expectations, but the one guided by clarity. Joan isn't closing the door on love, she's simply refusing to force it open. If love comes again, she wants it to feel steady, mutual, and emotionally safe. No pressure, no performance, no fear of being too much. Until then, she's choosing presence over possibility, living fully in the now rather than chasing what might come next. This story isn't just about a breakup, it's about what happens after the goodbye, when the noise fades and you're left with yourself. Joan Vassos didn't lose a relationship, she gained clarity. And sometimes that changes everything. Thanks for watching Golden Bachelor. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next big story.